Hello there, my name is Ugly Duckling Games and I'm an indie game developer. I've released 9 games on Game Jolt and Itch over the past few years, and I've also released 1 game on Steam to limited success. Today I'm going to show you 6 days of development on my new game, which for now I'm calling Mars Patriot, or Project Iterance. I plan to use a more iterative design approach than usual, as I find that over-planning my games usually ends with them crashing and burning before I've even written a single line of code. So this game is truly back to basics. Enjoy. I started by making a basic top-down player controller with some basic movement and camera offset code, and then I went into a separate area to test as a level, and I put down this orange polygon 2D, just sort of picked a random color, and then I added a directional light to test Godot's new lighting capabilities, and I ended up thinking that this shade of orange looked really nice. Then I added a light occluder 2D and just drew up a quick shape with it and thought the color on that looked really nice, and that's just the editor color, so in game it doesn't look like that. So I decided I would make some polygon 2Ds and use that same color, and now it looks really nice. I think the contrast in the different oranges really looks nice, and I might change the colors slightly. I might use some kind of color palette generation, but for now I think this looks really nice, just for a quick 20-minute session of work. Alright, so I've done a little bit more work than last time. So I've added a bullet object, which is very rudimentary, and it can move. You can't shoot yet, but I've just put some bullets here to test that they move properly. And I've made here a little fake enemy, and I've set up a little component system from the video made by Firebelly Games, which is a really handy video. I'll probably link that in the description. And so you've got these 2 components, so like I've done here, I just added a polygon 2D and added the 2 components, and if you look at it now, it takes damage, and it has an invulnerability timer, which is why it only took 1 damage. That's its health there. I can turn off the invulnerability timer, and bang, now it's on -1 health. So you can see how that works, and here you've got sort of some of the code and stuff. You know, we've got the health component, and you set its max health, could be anything you want. Damage component, you can choose if it's invincible or not, which could probably be used in some kind of state machine or other code on the enemy itself, which accesses the damage component. Then you have the health component, so that it can access the health component and damage it and actually reduce health. The invulnerability timer, so that, let's just say you want it so that it can only do damage every 1 second, then you can set that up. And you can set up the faction, so if it's on the player faction, because the bullets are on the player faction, it won't do any damage. There is also an area 2D on the damage component, which handles damage, but I might change this so that it doesn't come with an area 2D and you have to add that yourself so that you can customize it, because otherwise you will have to do editable children and fiddle with the resources, and I think that's just too tedious, and I don't really want it to work like that. So yeah, that is my update for today. Alright, so update on the 19th. Today I turned the damage component into an area 2D instead of having it so you have to add one separately. So that way it can handle collisions a bit nicer, and all you need to do to set it up is just add one in and then add your own collision shape, which can be set to any size you want. And I also tinted it green so that you can easily tell which is the collision shape and which isn't, so that it's not just a million different blue squares, and I did that just on the component, on the modulate for it, so I don't have to actually change each collision shape manually. And then after that, I added a movement component. So the player no longer has its own movement code, and that may seem weird, but the reason I did it is because I want the acceleration and deceleration rate and the sort of style of movement to be the same for each enemy and NPC and the player, so that they have the same feel and nothing feels off or out of place. So So I've also given it to the enemy, which is, for the moment, doesn't really do much. And I've also added a navigation component, which is just a navigation agent renamed. And I've got some little variables on it, like the stopping distance, which is in squared measurement, so it's less performance taxing. And you have to select the movement component so it can actually move based on the navigation data. And once it does that, they can navigate. And I've set these to be obstacles, even though you can't actually collide with them, and they're just little light occluders and polygons, so they can actually navigate around it. I also added code for avoidance, so that if I add any obstacle props, they'll be able to dynamically avoid them without being part of the nav mesh, which is cool. And I gave them some of their own light occluders for the directional lighting to work on them. I'm not sure if I'll keep that on NPCs and enemies though. I also made it so the bullets rotate depending on velocity, just with this, and currently working on adding shooting. So I've started making a shooting component, and you can choose a projectile, so I've just chosen bullet as like the default one. And bullet spawn, you'll choose like a node for a bullet spawn position, and if you choose it separately, that means you can have it parented to like a gun, so it moves with the gun or something. I'll have auto shoot on for if it's an enemy, so it'll just automatically shoot if this is active, and then you could have a state machine that turns it on and off depending on whether they can shoot or not, but that won't be handled in the shooting component. And there'll be a shoot delay for how often they can shoot and how long it takes to shoot, and there's the damage, and of course faction as well. Yeah, so you can choose the faction, and that will go into the bullet when it creates it, but it doesn't really work yet. It's sort of in its infancy. But yeah, that's all of today's work. Alright, so today I added heaps of new stuff. So the first thing I did, I might just sort of skim through it, is I added on the movement component a feature to auto-rotate, so that they rotate in the direction that they're moving, or looks at player, so that they will look at the player if they're a shooting enemy, which I've done. I've had a melee enemy and a shooting enemy. I've added like a line of sight system, so that they won't shoot if you're through a wall. I made it so the player could shoot with just a bit of code, which is very rudimentary. I will add more to it later, like more weapons and stuff. I made it so enemies can die and the player can kind of die, but it's pretty janky. I changed the bullet around a bit, made its origin point here so it rotates properly. I added blood particle effects for the alien enemies, the aliens at the moment. I don't know if I'll change that or not. I added screen shake and zoom out when you shoot, so it's kind of all like polished feeling or whatever, really impactful. All the blood and stuff, so there's the shooting enemy and the melee enemy, and they'll shoot at you and stuff. And the player currently has blue blood, which I'll probably change, we'll see. Yes, I added the melee. I also added a color palette, which I think looks nice for the moment. And I've currently gotten rid of the shadows because I had a lot of problems with those. I might bring them back, but maybe not. There's other problems, but they also just, despite all the other problems, don't look very good with interiors. Looks kind of ugly, in my opinion. So yeah, we'll see about that. Alright, so today, on the damage component, I made the blood color customizable so that the player has a different blood color to the aliens. And then I made the fire rate faster because I've decided that this game, instead of being an unmounted human, you will be in like a mech fighting these giant aliens on Mars. So yeah, it's like a proper minigun. And I made the player move a little bit slower, but not too much, just to be in accordance with the mech thing, because it was a little bit too fast before. And I did some just sort of general improvements and fixed up a lot of the code. Yeah, I fixed up the bullet code and the player code, and I made it so the player can shoot multiple different projectiles. So on left click, got the minigun, and on right click, homing missiles. Yeah, I might change them a bit, but they're pretty cool. Anyway, that's all for today. Right, today I added a bunch of fun stuff and polish. I did post-processing, bullet dust, rocket trails, more explosion screen shake, dashing. I think that's about it. I also made the bullets destroy if they go too far away. If the rockets go too far, they'll also explode. And they also lose their target after a while, like actual rockets, I guess. And I also made it so that the primary and secondary weapons are like actual variable things, and hopefully in future you'll be able to like pick which weapon is your primary and secondary out of, let's just say, 10 or 20. So that you'll be able to go to some kind of like hub or hangar and change which loadout you have, and you'll just be able to pick 2 weapons. So you might have laser on left click and right click rockets, or minigun on left click, etc. So yeah, be excited.